My husband's new wife showed up at my front door wearing a smug grin. She looked me up and down and said, "We're here to claim what belongs to us from your father's estate. You need to pack up and move out right now." I didn't argue. I just smiled because at that exact moment, my lawyer stepped in right behind her. The morning dew still clung to the roses, shimmering like tiny diamonds under the soft dawn light, but the tranquility was shattered by a sound I had learned to loathe. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The rhythmic, aggressive crunch of expensive heels on my garden path told the story long before she spoke. Only one person would dare to wear Louboutins to stomp through my father's prized sanctuary, and that was Madeline. Her voice, when it finally drifted over the hedge, dripped with a fake sweetness that turned my stomach. "Still playing in the dirt, I see," she remarked, her tone suggesting that my labor was nothing more than a quaint, pathetic hobby. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an immediate reaction. Instead, I continued pruning my father's white roses, the very ones he had planted years ago with the hopeful intention of them decorating my wedding day. It was a bitter irony that wouldn't leave my mind. That wedding had ended in a flurry of divorce papers and my ex-husband, Holden, running off with the woman currently casting a long, dark shadow across my flower bed. "Hello, Haley," I said, finally acknowledging her presence without looking up. "You know why I'm here," she countered, moving closer until the sun was blocked by her silhouette. "The reading of the will is tomorrow, and Holden and I think it's best if we discuss things civilly." I finally stood, wiping my soil-covered hands on my gardening apron, and turned to face the vulture. "There's nothing to discuss. This is my father's house, and his estate was correction. Madeline," she interrupted, her perfectly painted red lips curling into a smug, sharp-edged smirk. "Since Holden was like a son to Miles for 15 years, we believe we're entitled to our fair share." The pruning shears in my hand suddenly felt incredibly heavy. The audacity was breathtaking. This was the same Holden who had cheated on Miles's only daughter with his secretary, yet here she was, claiming a filial bond that he had personally set on fire. "Ancient history, Haley," she continued, waving a manicured hand as if dismissing a minor inconvenience. "Miles forgave him. They still played golf every Sunday until—" She paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence of my father's recent passing hang in the air like a threat. My father's death was still a raw, gaping wound that hadn't even begun to scab over. He had been gone just weeks, and the grief felt like a physical weight in my chest. To have her standing here, circling what she thought was easy prey, was almost more than I could bear. "My father wouldn't have left Holden anything," I said, my voice firm as I stood to my full height. "He was many things, but he wasn't stupid." Haley's fake smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the predatory mask. "We'll see about that. Your brother, Isaiah, seems to think differently." A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air raced down my spine. Isaiah and I hadn't spoken since the funeral, where he had spent more time consoling Holden than his own sister. The betrayal felt like a second mourning. "You've spoken to Isaiah?" I whispered. "Oh, honey," Haley stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "We've done more than speak. He's been very helpful." I gripped the shears tighter, my knuckles turning white. I remembered my dad's voice from years ago, teaching me how to tend to these very bushes. The roses need a firm hand, Maddie, but never a cruel one. Even the sharpest thorn serves a purpose. "Get off my property, Haley," I said quietly, the rage beginning to simmer beneath a surface of forced calm. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound like breaking glass. "Your property? That's cute. This house is worth $5 million, Madeline. Did you really think you'd get to keep it all to yourself? Playing house in your daddy's mansion while the rest of us get nothing." I looked her dead in the eye. "My father built this house brick by brick. He planted every tree, designed every room. This isn't about money for me. This is about legacy." "Legacy?" Haley snorted, turning toward the gate. "Wake up. Everything is about money. And tomorrow, when that will is read, you're going to learn that the hard way." She paused at the exit, tossing a final look over her shoulder. Oh, and you might want to start packing. Holden and I will need at least a month to renovate before we move in. As her car engine faded into the distance, I looked down at the roses. Their pristine white petals were now spotted with soil where my trembling hands had crushed them. Dad always said white roses represented new beginnings, but in that moment, all I could see was red. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and dialed the one person I knew would be in my corner. Aaliyah, my best friend and a sharp legal mind, picked up on the second ring. It's me, I said, my voice cracking. Haley just paid me a visit. It's exactly as bad as we thought. Can you come over? There's something about the will I need to discuss. Aaliyah's voice was like an anchor in a storm. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't worry, Madeline. Your father was a lot smarter than they realize. As I hung up, a flash of white caught my eye. Poking out from beneath the dense foliage of the rose bush Haley had just stood over was a small envelope, its corner damp with dew. I picked it up, recognizing the handwriting instantly. It was unmistakably my father's script, addressed simply to Maddie. The paper felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of a secret he wasn't ready to tell while he was still breathing. Well, Dad, I whispered, turning the envelope over in my hands as the reality of the coming war settled in. Looks like you left me one last surprise. Aaliyah arrived with a legal briefcase in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. She didn't say a word, just walked straight into my father's study, the room still smelling of his pipe tobacco and old leather. I was perched on the edge of his chair, the unopened envelope resting in my lap like a live coal. You haven't opened it yet, Aaliyah noted, setting her things down with a heavy thunk. I wanted to wait for you, I admitted. Especially after what she said about Isaiah. Aaliyah poured 2 generous glasses of wine and handed one to me. Open it, Madeline. Your father was very specific about certain things being revealed at certain times. He knew the vultures would come circling the moment the dirt settled. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small, tarnished brass key. Dear Maddie, I read aloud, my father's voice echoing in my mind so clearly it felt like he was in the room. If you're reading this, then someone has already made a move on the estate. Knowing human nature as I do, I'm guessing it's Haley. She always did remind me of a shark, all teeth and no soul. Aaliyah let out a sharp, appreciative snort. The letter continued. The key enclosed opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, you'll find everything you need to protect what's yours. Remember what I taught you about chess, Maddie? Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen. Love, Dad. I looked up at Aaliyah, who was already gesturing toward the desk. You knew about this? I asked, breathless. I helped him set it up, she admitted. He came to me months ago, right after the diagnosis. He knew exactly how Holden and Haley would play their hand. The drawer opened with a soft, mechanical click. Inside lay a thick manila envelope and a black USB drive. As I spread the contents across the mahogany desk, my heart hammered against my ribs. Photos spilled out, dozens of them. Haley meeting a man in a dark parking lot, Holden entering a law office that definitely wasn't Aaliyah's, bank statements with highlighted discrepancies. He had them followed? I asked, stunned. Better, Aaliyah said, her eyes flashing with a cold, professional triumph. That USB drive contains video footage of Haley attempting to bribe your father's palliative care nurse for information about his will just 2 days before he died. I picked up one photo and felt the world tilt. It was Isaiah, my brother, meeting with Haley at a coffee shop 3 weeks ago. Is this what she meant? I whispered, my heart breaking. Look at his face in the next photo, Maddie, Aaliyah urged. In the second shot, Isaiah was leaving the meeting, his expression twisted with sheer disgust, clutching a slip of paper. He kept the check she gave him as evidence. He brought it straight to your father. That's when Miles knew he had to act fast. But Haley said he was helping them. I trailed off, realization dawning. Your brother has been playing a very dangerous game, Aaliyah explained. Feeding them just enough useless information to keep them confident, all while helping your father gather the final nails for their coffins. I sank back into the leather chair, my mind spinning. Why didn't he tell me? Because Haley needed to feel like she had the upper hand. She needed to show her full hand before we played ours. Aaliyah pulled a document from her own briefcase. Tomorrow, at the reading, your father has set a trap. The initial reading will grant them exactly what they want, a significant portion of the estate. I stood up so fast my wine glass tipped, staining the Persian rug a deep, bloody red. What? After everything they did? Let me finish, Aaliyah said, her voice calm. Your father added a codicil 3 days before he passed. The moment they accept that inheritance, they trigger a clause that reveals their attempted manipulation, the bribery, and the fraud. Everything becomes public record, and the inheritance is voided. He made them think they won so they would incriminate themselves in front of everyone. I looked at the evidence spread across the desk, the photos of the man I once loved and the woman who destroyed my life, caught in the act of trying to steal a dead man's peace. Dad hadn't just left me a house, he had left me a shield. He's teaching me one last lesson, isn't he? I murmured. About consequences, Aaliyah agreed. And tomorrow, we watch them walk right into the cage they built for themselves. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 10 times, its deep, resonant tolling echoing through the quiet house. Aaliyah had gone home to prepare for the morning, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my father's study. Just as I was about to turn off the lights, there was a tentative knock at the heavy oak front door. I knew that knock. It was rhythmic, hesitant, and carried a weight of guilt I hadn't felt in years. I opened the door to find Isaiah standing there, looking like he hadn't slept since the funeral. His designer suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching a leather portfolio to his chest like a shield. You look terrible, I said, the words coming out more bluntly than I intended. Yeah, well, he replied, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Playing double agent isn't nearly as glamorous as the movies make it out to be. Can I come in, Maddie? I stepped aside, gesturing toward the study. The evidence of Dad's plan was still spread across the desk. Isaiah's eyes fell on the photos, and he let out a long, weary sigh. I see you found the insurance policy. Why didn't you just talk to me, Isaiah? I asked, closing the door behind us. I thought I was losing you too. I thought you had chosen them. He slumped into the chair across from Dad's desk, the portfolio dropping onto his lap. Because I needed to make it right. After the divorce, after the way I handled Holden. I was an idiot, Maddie. I was so blinded by the business and the bro code that I didn't see what they were doing to you until it was almost too late. You were my brother, I said, the hurt finally surfacing. You were supposed to be the one person I didn't have to worry about. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making that up to you. But look at this. He opened the portfolio and pulled out a check. It was made out to him for $500,000. This is what Haley offered me to testify that Dad wasn't of sound mind when he drafted the final version of the will. $500,000 to betray my own blood. I stared at the check, the numbers blurring. But you didn't cash it. Of course not, he snapped, his voice cracking. I took it straight to Dad. You should have seen his face, Maddie. He wasn't even angry. He just looked disappointed. Not in me, but in the fact that he was right about them. That's when he told me about the codicil. That's when he told me to keep playing along. He pulled a phone from his pocket and pressed play on a recording. Haley's voice filled the room, sharp and predatory. Once the old man kicks it, we'll contest the will with your testimony about his mental state. With Holden's history at the company and your support, we'll get everything. Madeline won't even know what hit her. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. I listened as Holden's voice joined in, the man I had shared a bed with for 15 years. We sell the house, liquidate the assets. Madeline can go back to her little apartment and her pathetic gardening business. She never deserved any of this anyway. Turn it off, I whispered, the bile rising in my throat. Isaiah complied immediately. There's more, Maddie. Things Dad found out right before he died. Haley didn't just want the money, she wanted revenge. She hated that you caught them. She hated that she had to be the mistress for so long. She wanted to strip you of everything that made you feel safe. He handed me a document that made my heart stop. It was a series of bank transfers from Harrison Industries, dating back 6 months before I ever caught them. She was embezzling, I realized, scanning the figures. Large sums. Dad found out right before the diagnosis. He was building a criminal case against her, but then the cancer moved too fast. That's why the will is set up the way it is. It's not just a trap, it's a confession. By claiming the inheritance, they are legally acknowledging their contributions to the company, which ties them directly to those accounts. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the ticking of the clock. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw the boy who used to help me catch fireflies in the garden. Remember when we were kids? I asked softly. And Dad caught us fighting over that red toy Corvette? Isaiah smiled, a real one this time. He made us wash every window in the house. He said we needed to learn to see things clearly. I see clearly now, I said, reaching across the desk to take his hand. I see what he was doing. He wasn't just protecting the money, Isaiah. He was protecting us. He was making sure that when he left, we were standing on the same side of the line. Isaiah squeezed my hand back. He told me something the last night I saw him, Maddie. He said that sometimes the biggest victory isn't in winning the fight, it's in letting your enemies defeat themselves. I looked out the window at the moonlit garden. The roses were pale ghosts in the dark, silent witnesses to the decades of family history contained within these walls. Tomorrow, Haley and Holden would come here expecting to tear it all down. They would come with their greed and their arrogance, thinking they had finally won. They had no idea that my father had turned his entire legacy into a mirror, one that was about to show the world exactly who they were. You should get some rest, Isaiah said, standing up and gathering his things. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Haley's even hired a camera crew, you know. She wants to document the historic moment. She takes possession of the estate for some social media branding she's planning. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The irony was almost too perfect. She hired cameras to record her own downfall? Dad would have loved that. He really would have, Isaiah agreed, heading toward the door. See you in the morning, sis. Don't worry, we've got the high ground. As I watched him leave, I felt a strange sense of peace. The fear that had been my constant companion since the divorce was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I walked back to the garden gate one last time before bed, touching the cool wood. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. And tomorrow, the siege was going to end very, very badly for the invaders. The morning of the will reading was deceptively beautiful. The sun streamed through the stained glass in the foyer, casting vibrant patterns of red and blue across the floor. Aaliyah was already in the study, her expression a mask of professional neutrality, though her eyes sparkled with anticipation. The circus is here, Isaiah announced, joining us. He pointed toward the window where a small film crew was unloading equipment from a black SUV. Haley was there too, wearing a black designer dress that looked more like a coronation outfit than funeral attire. She was gesturing wildly, directing the cameraman to capture the majesty of the entrance. Places, everyone, Aaliyah said, her voice dropping into her courtroom register. The door opened and Haley swept in, followed by a visibly nervous Holden. The camera crew trailed behind them, adjusting lights and checking audio levels as if they were filming a reality show. Meline, Holden nodded stiffly at me. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't say a word, I just took my seat. As Miles Harrison's attorney, Aaliyah began, her voice commanding the room. I will be reading his last will and testament. For his instructions, this is being recorded for the estate's archives. She glanced at Haley's camera crew, who were nodding eagerly. The reading started predictably. My father's personal effects, his minor investments, and his charitable donations were listed first. Then came the big one, the 40% stake in Harrison Industries and the deed to the house. I knew it. Haley squealed, unable to contain herself. She grabbed Holden's arm, her face lit with a terrifying, predatory joy. He loved us. I told you he understood. She turned to the camera, flashing a winning smile. This is a new chapter for the Harrison legacy, one built on "if I could continue," Aaliyah interrupted, her tone sharpening. There is a codicil, added 3 days before Mr. Harrison's passing. It states that the acceptance of any inheritance under this will is contingent upon a full financial audit and a background verification of the beneficiaries. Haley's smile didn't just fade, it vanished. A what? What audit? He's dead, what does it matter? Holden stood up, his face draining of color. Aaliyah, what are you talking about? Aaliyah didn't answer him. Instead, she began sliding folders across the desk. These are the findings of that audit. Photos of unauthorized meetings with competitors. Records of a bribery attempt involving a medical professional. And most importantly, the digital trail of over $2 million embezzled from Harrison Industries over the last year. The room went deathly silent. The cameraman, sensing the shift in tone, lowered his lens slightly, but he didn't stop recording. This is a lie, Haley screamed, lunging for the papers. This is a setup by her. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She's always been jealous. She's trying to frame us. Actually, Haley, Isaiah said, stepping forward from the shadows of the bookshelf. You framed yourself. I have the recordings. I have the check you gave me. And the police have the original ledger from your office. Holden looked like he was going to faint. Haley? What is he talking about? You said we were just securing our future. Haley whirled on him, her mask finally shattering. Shut up, Holden. You coward. You knew we needed that money. That's when Aaliyah played the final card. She pressed a button on the remote, and the large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was a video of my father, recorded in his final days. He looked frail, but his eyes were like flint. If you're watching this, his voice rang out, it means greed has led you exactly where I expected. You thought you were playing a game with an old man, but you were playing a game with a father. Madeline is my legacy. This house, this company, they belong to those who honor them, not those who seek to bleed them dry. He looked directly into the camera, and for a second, it felt like he was looking right through Haley's soul. The authorities have been notified. The evidence is airtight. You didn't just lose the money, Margaret. Oh yes, I know about the Florida name change. You lost your freedom. The explosion that followed was chaotic. Haley began screaming obscenities, trying to smash the camera that was still recording her meltdown. Holden just sat there, head in his hands, weeping as the realization of his prison sentence set in. 2 plainclothes detectives, who had been waiting in the hall, entered the room and began the process of making the arrests. As Haley was led out in handcuffs, still shouting threats about how she would destroy me, I felt a strange, profound lightness. The media circus she had invited became her judge and jury. The footage from her own camera crew was seized as evidence and eventually leaked to the press, showing the world the exact moment the sharks were pulled from the water. In the end, Holden took a plea deal, testifying against Haley in exchange for a reduced sentence. Haley, or Margaret, as we now knew her, received 20 years for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. A few weeks later, Isaiah and I were back in the garden. The news vans were gone, the lawyers were paid, and the silence had returned. I was pruning the white roses again, but this time, I wasn't doing it to hide. He really did it, didn't he? Isaiah asked, handing me a fresh bag of mulch. He saved us. He gave us a choice, I corrected, looking at the house. He showed us that the truth always finds its way to the light, as long as someone is willing to hold the lamp. I reached into my apron and pulled out the last letter Dad had left in the desk drawer, the one marked after justice is served. My dear Maddie, it read, don't let this experience harden your heart. The garden still needs tending, and life still needs living. I didn't set this trap just for justice. I did it so you could be free. Free from doubt, free from fear, and free to bloom again. Love, Dad. I looked at the white roses, their petals full and vibrant in the afternoon sun. For the first time in years, I didn't see the past or the betrayal. I saw the soil, the water, and the potential for everything yet to grow. I picked a single, perfect bloom and placed it on the bench where my father used to sit. The thorns were still there, sharp and protective, but the flower was beautiful. And finally, so was the view.